Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I get the opportunity to work on an old, very large, early edition Penn International fishing reel. The International reels are big game reels. This one was introduced around 1967, and it had a run of about 20 years before being upgraded. So this is the original version. This is the Penn International 50. Certainly has seen a lot of use, but that doesn't mean it can't continue to use and fish on for years to come. This one was sent in by Herbert, and we're going to do our best to clean this one up. You can see there's a lot of old greases that have leaked out. Tune it up. The reel seems to be running fine from everything that I can see in terms of the performance of it. It spins in free spool, and at first strike it's out there doing its job, and again in max drag as well. Well, we're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces. We'll show you how this reel was made. We'll show you how to service it and how to keep it fishing for a long time to come. This is an older saltwater reel. I don't know the history on it. So what I want to do is I want to take the opportunity to kind of flush down all of those screws, because, well, the screws have a tendency to snap off, and if they've been salt encrusted for years, you just don't know. Any bit that you can do to give you an advantage will help, and penetrating oil on the screw heads, well, it's a start. We're also going to start by asking you to subscribe to my channel if you like the art of fishing reel repair, if you like to learn about fishing reels, if you like to understand how they're made, the manufacturers and so on. Well, I try to cover most of that as I am servicing fishing reels. So I would encourage you to subscribe, and if you do subscribe, please use the notification button. This has a tie-down collar. It's held in place by that little screw that we just took out. And when I take my pieces and parts out, I put those into a part strip. I'm not sure if that can be handled by the regular one. It can. This nut will take the wrench for the 6.0 and above Penn Senators. I also have a wrench that's actually a Shimano wrench, but it does have the scalloped nut that seems to work with this one as well. There's some dirt on here. That's to be expected. There's some corrosion on here. Gosh, the reel is 50 years old. You would expect that as well. A little bit of dirt. We'll do all the cleanup that we can on this. I'm going to just start with a little bit of a spray of penetrating oil just to loosen some of that. And I also like to use a 4.0 steel wool. It's a buffing steel wool. It's probably the finest of them, just to kind of knock off that dried or shellacked grease and restore some of the luster for that chrome. Well, this one's going to take a while to service it completely. I can recommend that you get the beverage of your choice, and stay tuned, because we're going to cover an awful lot in this video. I'm not sure this is the original Penn handle for it. I think it is, but they have changed the handles over time. This is that hard plastic one. Had a little bit of dirt and mud on there, so why not? Underneath the handle there is a washer that's going to fit on top of that gear post. I recommend that you take pictures. Use a cell phone, use a camera, use whatever you want. Take a video if you like. But there's an awful lot of moving pieces and parts going on here. There's a lot that you're going to be taking off. You need to have an organizational system for dealing with the parts that you remove. And well, you just need to get control of this before you start taking the parts off. One of the things, for example, is there's a little spacer here. When I take this screw out, that spacer usually falls out. And well, most of the time, if you're not paying attention, you don't have an idea where it goes. I'm just going to lift that up and out, if I can. And I like to take that spacer and put it on the screw. That way I know that it belongs there. And what that screw is, because there's going to be an awful lot of screws coming out of this. And your organization should account for different pieces and parts of the reel or sub-assemblies. I like to keep those parts together. So I'm choosing a corner of my tray over there, and I actually have a few different trays. Notice that this screw is a lot longer than the one we took out on the other side. Those are all important. as you go, not necessarily to disassemble the reel, but to reassemble the reel. We'll do the same thing with the spacer here. And we have one more, that's that track. So let's go ahead and take that off. And so I'm keeping the 3 screws that hold that track in place out. And then that track can slide out. When we go to reassemble, we'll do it a little bit of a different way. And I like to clean these up as best I can. Now, one of the things I will apologize for is if some of these things get out of frame. I use a preset camera here. I don't have anybody shooting these videos other than me. So I try to preset, and I try to do the preset that gets the most of the reel. Something like this, it's a very large reel, and well, it may fall out of the frame from time to time, and I'll apologize up front. This preset comes out by removing the 3 screws in the side plate here. Make sure you match your screwdriver to the slot in the screws. That gives you maximum torque, and it also saves you from butterflying those slots in the reel. These are stuck in pretty good, as I was saying before. I didn't hit these with the penetrating oil. Maybe I should have. As I'm taking them out, I'm laying them in a corner of my box, my parts tray. And I'm also checking to make sure they're all the same size. It's been a while since I've done one of these. As I mentioned, the reel was discontinued in 1984. Doesn't mean it can't go fishing. It just means that that's when they upgraded that to the next version of the reel. Pull that whole assembly off. And now there's a clip behind here. Good place to take a picture. That clip comes out, the preset button comes out, and you can see there's an awful lot of old greases in that, so you don't want to ignore that and that plate as you're doing this. I like to kind of clean as I go on a reel like this. It helps me to remember the orientation of the pieces and parts, and also kind of gives me a feel for the assembly. I'm going to use chrome cleaner on this. Well, it is a chromed piece. It is also going to help to dissolve any of that older stuff that's on there, the greases and the like. The chrome cleaner is an automotive polish. It's Turtle Wax's chrome cleaner, for those of you that are interested. And again, the 4R is more of a buffing, least abrasive of steel balls. It doesn't scratch, or if it scratches, they're micro scratches. You're not going to see it. And it's going to shine it a whole lot better. There you go, that plate cleaned up nicely. I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to see if I can mop some of that off with penetrating oil. That's some old dried grease there. So if nothing else, the preset itself probably had a little bit of an issue. We have a washer on this side of the preset. Take that off to get a better clean. There's some stuck grease, so we'll do that with the steel wool. You could use a kitchen scrubby. It's a little bit less abrasive than this is. And the idea is to get all that old stuff off so that it operates smoothly. The front, I think, was pretty clean. Yeah, the front is clean. It might even polish up a little bit with that chrome cleaner there. All right, before I go too far then, just want to take the time to reassemble. There's a washer goes in here. And something just seems odd about that washer, because the side here is narrower than the diameter of that big washer. This is always fun, trying to figure out which is which. Pretty sure this is the side that it came in on. So what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the holes to make sure that it is, and it's not. I could have made that mistake pretty easily, right? So just take your time again. And I should have just looked. There is a bevel on this side of the screw hole. I come on back on the other side, slip that other retainer clip back in. That's your preset. That'll go into our box as well. Now we can lift off the lever, and we'll adjust the drag. Notice that there is a Teflon ring that goes behind the lever. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of pieces and parts going on with this one. You could actually replace this little handle knob. There's 2 or 3 things there. There's a screw, there's a collar, there's that little piece in case somehow it broke off or something. But you don't need to do this all by just sense of feel. The schematic is available out on the internet. This one is available through mysticparts.com, and it shows you we're working on this section right here, right now. Okay. Those can go in here, and as I mentioned, I like to organize all of those by sub-assembly, so that's essentially the face assembly of this reel. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch trays now. So I have a tray. This is the handle assembly. This is the side plate screws and the lever drag assembly. I'm just going to put that off to the side. And go for another tray now. And hopefully we will be able to remove all of these screws. So here's a good thing to note when you're doing this. There's 2 screws that were holding that the ramp or that slide bar for that lever and the adjuster for the drag. When you go to reinstall, don't fill those screws with don't fill those holes with screws. You know the screws that came out of there, but it's easy to take one of these side plate screws and put it in there, well, and then it just doesn't line up right. Okay, there's what looks like 5 remaining screws here. We did put a little bit of penetrating oil on there. We'll see what we can do. Again, you want to note if screws are longer or shorter and where they belong. These should be long screws because they should be going through the side plate, through the harness lug, and into that crossbar assembly there. This is the part where other people who do these things kind of speed it up, but you know, I figure let it just run the whole way. That way you get to see everything that does come off. And who knows, sometimes I get questions in the middle of these things, like about a particular part of sub-assembly that others have skipped over just because they said, you know, I'll be back when all the screws come out. So one never knows. All right, here's the 3rd screw. I want to make sure that that's the same length as the others. It is. And we should have and we don't have the corresponding screw on this side, and you did see the lug harness fall out. So we know that the front side of the reel next to the full engaged drag is where that longer screw from the lever bar goes. And again, it's real easy to take that one long screw and put it in there versus the other side. Then you go to install the lever bar and, well, something doesn't match up. All right, these should be a little shorter now, I'm thinking. Yeah, these 3 are shorter. They go in the reel seat. And when that's off, we should have this plate kind of jump out a little bit because it's spring-loaded for your lever drag. Second small one. And then this should be the last one holding that side plate assembly in. And it is. So we have 6 screws and a side plate assembly. Okay. I take those 6 screws and put those in the corner of the new parts tray. Just like we did with the others, I have the opportunity here to clean that harness lug, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, there's some residual of that chrome polish there. You don't need to overload it. The idea is to get the oil greases and that off. Okay, this whole assembly should come up now and off, and it does. Here's a look into your internal side of your reel. This is your main gear, a bearing, and a noisemaker. That noisemaker actually hits this trip ramp here. You can see the little indentations in that ramp. And this is a ball stud thing that's going to just kind of jump out like that. Okay, To get that main gear out, if I recall, we have to take the tie-down plate off. And I like to do the sub-assembly, so we're going to set the rest of that aside for a moment. Just going to work on the gear. This has a washer, and the washer has a rectangular stud in it, and that holds the main gear piece in place. These 3 screws are similar to screws like on a Penn Jigmaster. Flathead and it's short. And if I recall, we should be able to push this whole thing through with these screws out. That's where your schematic comes into play. That's your second screw, and we should have one more here now. Wow, that always makes it tough. There we go. Again, match your screwdriver tip as close as possible to that slot in the screw so that you don't strip it. Those 3 screws are the same. I think we should be able to pop that up now. There we go. Oops. That'll bring the whole shaft through. You can tell we got the old greases on there. This is your main gear now, and again, take a picture. You don't want to get the wrong side going back in. And a lot of what we do when we service a reel is we make sure that it is cleaned. We inspect the pieces and parts to make sure that there's no damage. This reel will seem to be running fine. And we do a good cleaning. There's some dried grease on here, so again, the dried grease in here is just settled there from time. There's no movement on this piece here because the lockdown, that little collar on the back end of that shaft, holds it in place. And then check the teeth on your main gear. Make sure that they're all clean. And if they're not, take a hard brush. It could be a wire brush, could be a brass brush, toothbrush for all that matters. But take something and make sure that all those channels are clean. And as I do that, I like to keep a paper towel under there, just so that if there is any debris that comes out, that it comes out on the paper towel, not on my table, and it doesn't get transferred to the next project. Okay, we've got the gear stem or shaft, the main gear, and now we just want to clean the case. Inside the case there's a bearing. Test the bearing, make sure that that's working. And for the most part you can leave that assembly just like it. It's holding a bearing. On the inside of it is the adjuster lever for your free spool, or you can just pop it out. I'll show you the assembly, pop it out for you. This is your assembly. You have the adjuster that we showed you, that button. It's going to fit in that slot there. It's going to move this bearing in and out. Right now we're in the off position. We're in the position for free spool. And as you turn this in, you'll notice that the bearing goes out. So that's the max drag. Your bearing is pushing the pressure on the plate, and then you back it out the other way. And I like to make sure it's backed out completely. This is a little tension that holds it in its slot, and so much for show and tell. This was kept oiled back here. This is fine. Just going to, as long as I'm here. So this is your carrier ramp back here, and it might be hard to see, but this actually goes up. It starts low, goes high, and that's what's adjusting the play on this. So I like to set this when I'm doing the reel, set this so that those two little studs are nestled completely in that section there. So it's in here and it's in the ramp underneath. Just like that, and that's how we found it before. We also have this collar here, and that's just a big old chunk of metal. So you can clean behind it, but there's really nothing going on there other than, well, taking up space, I guess, keeping it solid, and providing the support for that. While I have this off, it's a convenient time to do some cleaning of that outside case because there's nothing in the way. I'm going to use a Penn Precision Reel Cleaner, kitchen scrubby, and try to get some of that old tarnish off of this. There's a lot of shellacked oils and greases all around this faceplate. You know what, taking that off is actually going to make it even easier to do back in here, so let's do that again. This is your click button. You saw it's a ball bearing on it, and well, on that click button you can take it apart if you need to replace the ball bearing, but if you do not need to take the ball bearing, leave it alone. The kitchen scrubby didn't have enough to it, so with that rod and reel cleaner on there, I'm just going to shift over to the 4/0 steel wool to try and clean up the varnish on this. I think we did a pretty good job there. I have a paper towel now, mop that off. Go ahead and put this back on. And we can set that aside. Oh, I guess we knocked the other piece off. We're knocking everything off right now, aren't we? Just be patient. See where it helps to take good notes. For those of you wondering, we can reset this side as well. This did pop out with all that commotion above there. Realign those slots so that it accepts it all the way down. Put that carrier in, make sure you're nice and flush there. Okay, at the risk of all things falling out all the time, we're going to go and reinstall the main gear assembly to hold all of that in place. I'll take the fishing reel grease onto the shaft for the gear. Set that aside. Take the main gear. I'm using Penn Precision reel grease, not because it's a Penn reel, but because it's a fishing reel. And I recommend that you only use fishing reel grease on fishing reels. And you want to get a good amount of grease into here. Cover most teeth, you don't have to cover them all. I'll bring that around to this side. You gotta hold all this together now because that little oil kind of made it slippery. Make sure your plates are aligned. The slot in there, nice and even. Next up then, the residual greases in here. Let's wipe them down again. Okay, we can set the main gear in like that. It has to go in that way. You can't attach this first. And slide our shaft assembly over. And then you want to align your screw holes. Go to your parts tray for those 3 flathead screws that are small. and we can reattach the main gear. That's going to hold everything in place now. Most of it. That outside can still come apart, but that'll hold this assembly in here. So just be patient when you're dealing with a reel like this. Have a plan, take a break. You know, this isn't a speed competition here. If you like, you can just set the pieces down for a moment, go get a refreshment. And we probably will do that right after we get this shaft done. So far we've seen some high quality parts, beautiful main gear, pretty sure that's stainless, nice assemblies, quality bearings. I got one more to tighten down here, and like I said, we'll probably take a break. Alright, that's all tightened. Back, make sure the other one got tight. I'll just do one more thing here. I'm going to shut the camera off and go get a glass of iced tea or something. I'm going to oil that bearing, let that oil seep in. I'm going to oil that plunge mechanism for the noisemaker. And we're going to just set this aside now, because this sub-assembly is done. Okay, we'll be back in a moment. Well, welcome to part 2, I guess. This is how to service the spool assembly. So the spool assembly has a shaft. You can take that out at the moment. It has a series of bearings in it. And it has a drag washer assembly in it, which is what we're going to be working on next. I want to clean the main gear here. That's intersecting with the gear that we just serviced in the side plate. There are 2 tension washers on here. They're face to face, they're concave. They provide some flexibility in the performance of it. There's 2 more here that have got stuck inside. Take those and put those right on the piece as well. And this is where the schematic and where the picture taking helps. You got another big bearing here. We should be able to walk the spool out now. There we go. On the inside of the spool, this is your click mechanism for your anti-reverse. And then the drag washer is underneath. On the inside of the case here, we want to do some cleaning. This has got the oil greases as well. And I should have planned my break 2 minutes later, because I just hear that there's a package at the door. So I guess I'm going to go get that package. Okay, well, I'm back, and probably didn't have to worry too much about that, but you know what? Why leave it out on the porch? Okay, we want to clean this now. We have some old greases here. Not sure why they were greasing a spring, but they did. They probably actually is greasing the bearing, and that's what got thrown off into the springs. I'm going to use a little bit of that penetrating oil again. These bearings are super high quality bearings. I rarely ever see one of these bearings fail, but always check these when you're servicing a reel if you find that they're tight or if they're noisy. And of course, you're fishing the reel most of the time. If you're doing this as a DIY, and well, you'll know if there's noisy bearings, go get them replaced. To remove that, you would remove the collar on the outside, pull this out with a puller, and but there is some dirt on the end of it. This is a dead end shaft. The inner race is going to be spinning with that axle shaft that goes through the spool. But there's no, sometimes folks look for like a T-bar attachment or something. It doesn't exist on this reel. While I have this open, I'm going to take that chrome cleaner again. I have a nice heavily plated wheel seat here, so let's go ahead and shine that up. This is the only opportunity you'll get to do that with that big spool in there. And I'll mop that down and wipe that off with a paper towel. There's usually some dirt on the underside of this, so go ahead and do that as well. We got something here like an old rubber band or something. Got caught on there. And this one's pretty much put a little bit of oil in the bearing, and that side plate service is done. Important to notice the swing on these anti-reverse dogs. They're going to go that way. They're going to rest on top of that spring that's out there. So when we go to put it back on, it intersects with the slots on the side plate here. And that enables it to stop the reel backpedaling. There's 4 very small screws here. Use a micro screwdriver for these. Some of the newer versions of this reel, I think, have a screw cap on it as opposed to these 4 tie-down screws. They're easy to lose and hard to find, so please take your time with these. Definitely put them in a parts tray as you remove them. I like to keep a variety of tools on my desk. You never know when you're going to need them. That was almost an example of a hard to find and easy to lose one. And micro drivers are one of those things that I leave nearby. And I do prefer the longer handled ones, like this one. And I think this was probably a Harbor Freight set. We got one more here. You can see how the spring is pushing it all out already. And remember that I've got that screw on the other side of the plate. It didn't come out. And I'll get the 4th screw there. The spool assembly will lift up now. I want to get that screw out before it falls out and can't be found. And we'll show you the underneath. The 4 screws go into a corner of my tray. The ring will go in the tray. This is your pressure plate now. And it's got the drag washer on it, and this drag washer is in very good condition. How do I know that? You can see the cross hatching on it. If you can't see the cross hatching on it, if it was worn thin, then you would need to replace that. To replace that, I think this is a separate assembly that screws in with the 4 screws. Again, it's been a while. This one's in good condition. If you found that there was spots where you couldn't see very well with these, take a brush and just pull it through, just like we did with the teeth on the main gear. That'll clear any dried grease or maybe broken parts or worn pieces off of the drag washer. There's a spring. That spring is going to go here on that shaft. So just be aware of that. Okay, that's your pressure plate. Again, we saw what happens in terms of how this drag works. This whole spool gets pushed to tighten up the drag. It puts the pressure on it by pushing it from the other side. Main big bearing on this side. There's an equally big bearing on this side. So there's actually 4 very big bearings in this reel, and that's why it turns so smoothly. You don't want any debris on the plate side of this where the drag washer is going to work. And since we have the spool out and the line is removed, we can do one more pass here with this chrome cleaner and this steel wool just to see if we can't polish that up a little bit before we reassemble. This one has a lot of corrosion on one side. I'm not quite sure what the line was, whether if it was mono or if it was metal. But again, take your time in cleaning the reel. Since you have it open, it's a great opportunity to do just that. That shines up nicely. Okay. Again, if you had any questions about how the assembly works, you would go to your diagram, and that'll show you all of the pieces and how they come in. Okay, let's go ahead and put this back together then. Just clean off the rim of that. I have my axle shaft. I want to make sure that I get a nice amount of grease onto that. I have my tension washers behind that. A little bit of grease onto the shaft itself. There is a ferrule inside this. Let's assemble this, bring that through, and then leave the pressure on the top. That's the easiest way to do this one. Spring goes on now. Our plate merges with that. And then okay, to install the ring, I like to start with getting 2 screws into those holes. This requires a little bit of hand tension and the like. Center the ring, press down, and hopefully that's going to get the screws on the other side of the plate centered for tightening. I put one on each side 180 degrees apart. It seems like they're catching. Wonderful. One caught. There you go. I'll get the other one now. Okay, and then you can relax the tension once you have both of those installed. And I got them started before because it makes it a whole lot easier on me. Me and little screws don't play well together. I'm going to take that little bit of fishing reel grease to try and get the third one started. And we got one more. All right, so we've done an awful lot here. You can see how these reels take time, but the service on these is invaluable. You don't want to lose perhaps a fish of a lifetime. Again, these are going for a very big fish, whether it's tuna or shark. I'm not quite sure what Herbert uses these for, but he'll be ready to use them. Just notice there's a little bit of the dry grease on the ring. Okay, that is your spool assembly. And you can test, push it in and push it out. That'll tell you how you're going. Make sure that your dogs are set so that they're overlapping the springs. Center your spool. And you know you're locked in when you can turn in the one direction and have the anti-reverse set up in the other. Okay, we had that assembly that we did before. We're coming down pretty much to the end of this now. At the assembly we did before, we want to merge our main gear, the shaft, and the pinion gear. Then you want to line up your 3 holes for the reel seat. I'm going to grab one of those small screws that we know go in the reel seat to anchor this. We know we have the lug harness and a long screw up top, so let's anchor it 180 degrees apart. And once you tie down the two, just like we did the others, it's kind of fill in the blanks, right? I'm going to leave that one a little bit loose because I know I have to adjust that side. So we'll come back and tighten that up after I get this. So the sequence on this is you need to put your inside screws in before you can put your trim ring screws on for that lever drag. And just take your time. Now I can come back and tighten the other side. Remember, this one is the one that gets the long screw from the trim ring. So we'll come back over here, put the other two back in the real seat. And then the long one goes in that cross post right above me now. The rest of these go with the sub-assembly from the other side, or parts tray number 1. Again, if these are off camera, I do apologize. The reel is so big that when I'm working on it or focusing on the reel, sometimes I'm missing the view on the screen finder here. Tighten them all up. Okay. Next up then, we want to take the trim ring. That's in the other parts tray. We want to get that started. And that one has the spacer and it has the long screw for the base. Sometimes it's easier to get this started. There is a bend in the tag here that goes inward. Pretty sure it can only line up one way anyway, but let's get it in this way now. This is one of those videos you probably want to pause because it takes as long as it does to service this reel. Okay. That's here. We have the other one with the spacer. And just finishing tightening that up. There you go. Alright, that's all set. Next up, a plastic shim ring that goes under there. Like that. Now we can do that again. Alright, we're set with the lever. And we want to take our preset. This is going to come over the ring, and you need to align the slot on the lever with the slot in the hole here. So the easiest thing to do generally is just put it over like that, square it up, and then turn it until it falls into place. And it'll fall in place. 3 screws, they're all the same size. I'll hold that whole assembly down. It's been quite a journey. But we're getting close to the end of it here now. Just a few parts left in my tray, which is always encouraging, especially when you're working on a reel of this size, to bring it back to completion. Our handle goes on next. I like to start the handle screw by hand. I want to make sure that I'm not cross-stripping it in any regard. Once you've got it started by hand, you move over to the wrench. Finish tightening that down, and then make sure you line your scallop with the hole so that the clamps can sit in place. You just need a little bit more of a turn there. Let's take that off again. It's an iterative process. They're all close. That's probably it right there. Looks like I could put a little bit of cleaning on this little cap. It's the last piece. We'll see how we did. Grab the tie-down screw. Okay. Let's give it a test. We mounted this in free spool, so we should be spinning now. Spinning nice and easily. Let's see how we did with first strike. Oh, we got a nice first strike there. Boy, that turned a lot nicer and easier than before. All that dried grease out of there. Let's go to max drag. And we are set. There you go. Everything is working as it should. The only problem with this reel is this got bent somehow. That's the, remember I was saying you could actually take that part off and replace that. This probably got hit into a gun wall or something and bent the slide bar down a little bit. You can see the ring that it is wearing here, but yeah, I guess it also makes it a little sluggish when you're going for adjustments like in a free spool. But otherwise the reel has stood the test of time, and as I mentioned, this is a 50-year-old reel. It's got a lot of life left in it. There's no turning back on this one. It's ready to catch some fish again. I hope you've enjoyed that. This has been quite a journey, and I was happy to do the reel to show you all how to do it. I hope that all of you have learned something from it, and to those of you that want to be do-it-yourselfers on this, I wish you well with the project. You can certainly do it yourself. To all of our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. Your efforts truly are appreciated. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, stay watching, and have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.